Hi everyone, welcome to Steel City Business. I'm James Marriott and this is our first ever live episode in front of an audience. So for the benefit of people listening to the podcast version of this, you will all already know this, but we are at Leah's Yard in the heart of the city. This is part of Loose Lips, all part of the Crossed Wires Podcast Festival. There's been lots of episodes that have been recorded here on this very stage over the course of the weekend. I believe that we are the final one that's been done here. So that's either saving the best until last or relegated to the graveyard shift, and I'll let you guys decide at the end as to which one of that it is. We've got two amazing guests here today, although they are slightly different to what I've got written down in front of me, because we've got a last-minute substitution.
Yeah,
box
sorry
office,
about that. Sorry.
Box office.
But I think it's a good sub in terms of... You know, England's substitutions last night, the Lionesses were fairly ineffective. I think this is a good substitution that we've got.
Good save.
So we've got Dino and Alice with us. I'll let them introduce themselves in a second. Now, Dino, me and you have met before. Alice, I don't think we've met before.
I don't believe so, but you're...
Maybe very briefly over a coffee outside the coffee house just up the road last year.
A drive-by.
Very quickly. But because I'd done this prep thinking it was someone else, we'll just pretend that never happened.
You can use all your
Alice,
notes for Ellie.
We've never met before. So I thought that maybe it would be nice for us to get to know each other very briefly. Okay. Would you like to know an interesting fact about me that I've never said on a podcast before?
I'd love to.
This is a true story. I once accidentally followed a member of One Direction into a toilet cubicle.
So did you, didn't you?
You stole my line.
We've all done that.
Yeah, that was going to be my one. Okay.
That's kind of my confession.
Same.
So I thought, let's start rather than just asking
Which one, obviously?
It was the guy from Bradford.
That's Zane.
Zane, yes.
Zane.
It was Zane. If he's listening to this, and I believe he's a regular listener to Steel City Business, sorry about that, Zane.
He's telling this anecdote somewhere else.
It was embarrassing for everyone. Probably more embarrassing for him than it was for me. So if you'd both like to kind of introduce yourself and perhaps share a confession, something that you've not told about yourself on a podcast before.
Oh, okay. Do you want to go first, or do you want me to go first? Okay. My name's Alice Levine. I will maybe be familiar to you or not from a podcast called My Dad Wrote a Porno. I also host a show called British Scandal, and I run the Crossed Wires Festival with Dino and James. And a fact that I've never said on a podcast before is that I was flattered into starting a podcast festival. And you should watch out for that, because these two guys, they'll sell you the world. I tell you what. And now we are here in year 2.
So Alice has been very modest. My Dad Wrote a Porno is one of the biggest podcasts in the world.
Absolutely.
So to be talking about this on a business podcast is very relevant. I'm Dino Sofos. I run Persephonica. Our headquarters is just up the stairs there. We are a production company making some of the biggest shows in the UK, including Miss Me, Dua Lipa's Book Club, Political Currency. We're about to launch a new podcast next week with Zoe Ball and Joe Wiley. Before that, I worked at the BBC for many years, and I launched all the BBC News podcasts like Newscast and Brexitcast and Americast. And an interesting fact about me... Have you got one?
You've said them all, I think. I mean, I've heard all 3.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, we'll come back later.
Fair enough. We all say the word podcast now. Every day it's become an accepted phrase. When I was born, the word podcast did not exist. In fact, when I first started work, I'm not sure if the word podcast existed. Can either of you recall the first time that you came across the phrase podcast?
I think for me it was listening to the Ricky Gervais podcast. And that was the first podcast I was aware of, and I think that Carl Pilkington even said on that podcast, he's like, there's a word for it, it's called the broadcast, like we've already got a word for it. And Ricky and Steve were like, no, this is different, this is a pod broadcast. And I remember thinking, like, he's kind of right, there is already a word for it. But that was my introduction to the kind of type of show that I guess I wanted to make, and also to the concept of it in its entirety.
What year was that again?
I think that was around 20...
It's 20 years ago, actually.
Yeah, it was 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Podcasting is just over 20 now, isn't it? In fact, was it 2001, was it? The first time that the phrase was kind of...
Yeah, Apple Podcast launched 20 years ago, though, yeah. So that's the app that most people use before Spotify and BBC Sounds kind of came along.
When did you first become aware of podcasting?
Is it when you invented them?
Coming from. Same sort of time, actually. I just love the Ricky Gervais podcast. I think we talked about this before, and I just obsessed. I listened to the Radio X shows that they did, and then transitioned into the podcast, and I was because I was a radio nerd before, and I just love the on-demand nature, and there's something even more intimate about a podcast, and that's what really
I think we've both
floats my boat.
talked about channeling that energy into things that we've made since, like having that looseness and it feeling really quite different to radio, because there's a kind of feeling that you're not recording for anybody else sometimes with a podcast that you don't always have with a radio show.
I sometimes get a little bit frustrated with the way that people talk about podcasting as if it's just this kind of cute, sweet little lovely little podcasting, isn't that nice? And I kind of go, it's a serious thing. It's a serious business. I make my living from podcasting. You both make your living from podcasting. Dino, what was the point that you realised that you could do this full time, that this could be your thing?
Well, when I basically was running the BBC News social media accounts for BBC Politics. I was working in Westminster, and I was a bit bored, frankly, because I'd gone from radio to working in social media, and I really missed making audio. And I could see at the time that all these newspapers were launching political podcasts, and the BBC didn't have any, which was crazy, because we had the best broadcasters in the UK in that newsroom, and the newspaper journalists who aren't good broadcasters were doing podcasts, so we were kind of getting left behind. So that's when, in 2017, I launched a podcast called Election Cast, which the BBC didn't really know was happening. I kind of just did it in the back of the Millbank newsroom with Chris Mason and Adam Fleming, who were here on Friday, which was nice to get them here. And then that kind of turned into Brexit Cast, which, in the way that successful podcasts do, they build up slowly over time, and they start building up a niche audience, and then word of mouth, and then because it was the BBC, eventually the bosses saw that this thing was at number one in the charts, and the BBC were like, well, what do we do with this thing? Oh, let's turn it into a TV programme. So then they were like, we've given you a slot on BBC One. So actually, there's a lot of chat about visualisation now, podcasts, but we did that in 2018-19. But I was absolutely adamant that we had to retain the magic of the podcast, which is this little club that we'd created with those presenters and our audience, and that direct conversation that we were having with that audience, which was, just they were not having that anywhere else. So I think that around that time, sort of 2017, 18, that's when there was another wave. It was like the post-serial, wasn't it?
Yeah, and I think it's important to remember that lots of people now get their news from things like Political Currency, The Rest is Politics, news agents. These are places that people go over a newspaper or a news website, and that's kind of where that started, that topical news thing that you could tune into every day to get something that was happening right now. And when Dino made those shows, you were pulling people off doing the news, and then they were coming straight on, and they were giving you the kind of behind the scenes, if you like. So that we're all really used to that now. We're all used to hearing, news and current affairs talked about in that really undone way, but that wasn't happening then.
Yeah, and Chris Mason, who is now the BBC political editor, I think he was a reporter at the time, a correspondent, but when he did Brexit Cast, it really boosted his profile because it was such a big thing, and it was then televised. And I actually think that without that, he wouldn't now be the BBC political editor. Right. And that tone that we started on that podcast has now kind of filtered through into the news. So if you listen to the news now, or radio news programs, or watch TV bulletins, the way that correspondents talk is completely different to what they sounded like in 2017 before the podcast. So remember when Boris Johnson resigned as Prime Minister, Chris Mason was doing this broadcasting on the Today programme, and he stopped the the reports, to say, sorry, I'm just getting a call from Downing Street, I'm going to take it. There's no way that would have happened before the podcast. It was such a loose kind of gonzo, this is the moment, I'm just going to do it. And it just went viral that day. But that tone that Chris had developed, and that came, it's not like we'd invented that tone on the podcast, because he was doing it on 5 Live. And I think in Britain we have talk radio in Radio 4, 5 Live. 5 Live has a lot to answer for the podcast, I think, in terms of news and current affairs podcast, that really loose, conversational, informal way of talking.
Alice, give us some kind of idea, if you can, just how big porno is now.
My show, or just the concept of pornography?
Answer it however you choose.
Because I think pornography is doing really well for itself. So My Dad Wrote a Porno, for those that don't know, is a show that I produced and presented with two of my friends from university, one of whom had a dad who wrote an erotic novel, in fact 6 of them, and we did a series on each book and read a chapter episode by episode. It was also a kind of hybrid of porn and business advice. So if there are any people who run business, I mean, this is perfect for your show. Business people in the room will find it really helpful. Horny people in the room will find it really helpful. So I think that's everybody covered, actually, that's listening. Talking of the kind of, the undone nature of things, we started the show as a podcast because we knew that the 3 of us were going to make it. And we thought, how can we put something out which is glossy and is quality with 3 of us? And we knew, even though we'd made kind of student films and we'd made shorts and things together after university, we were like, we know that we can't do this as a TV show and have it be the quality that we want. And as a podcast, we were like, we really think we can put something out that is going to sound really excellent and can kind of compete with the BBCs of this world that have much bigger production teams. So we started that, and then just to fast forward and to kind of connect it to cross wires, we toured the world with our live show. We played Sydney Opera House, Radio City Music Hall in New York. We went all over the world with it, made a little bit of money. And yeah, it was our lives for nearly 10 years. It was a business for nearly 10 years.
How many downloads has it had to date?
I mean, I don't check every day anymore, but as I remember, 450 million.
Huge.
And about 350 million of that are my mum and dad, but the rest that's like a genuine stat after that. Yeah, and it was a different time, to like put it in context. I mean, we were joking about Michael Palin being the only man in the world that doesn't have a podcast. Then it wasn't such a crowded market, and we really were DIY, and the only thing that we really did as a concession to the sound quality, which will pain Dino, is switch the fridge off so it didn't hum over the microphones, and our mics were, on piles of cookbooks. But I loved that we could do that as a 3. I loved that we could be the producers, the editors, we could be the hosts, we could do it all. And I still like to do all those things when I make something now.
James, you were just saying about this kind of people that sneer a bit at the podcast as not a kind of professional medium. I think looking at this, what we've created here this weekend, is just the answer to that, to those people. We have the biggest names in UK entertainment here for 3 days, all presenting podcasts. If it wasn't a big deal, they wouldn't be doing it, and they wouldn't be.
It's not the poor cousin, is it anymore? No. It's not. It's what people actually
they really want
do
to
as
do
their
it.
Priority. Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And where they're making the money from.
Yeah, absolutely. Dino, who's been your favourite person that you've worked with in podcasting?
Stop.
Well, we've never worked.
You've actually never had the pleasure, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So you don't count. The great thing about running your own company and deciding, coming up with podcast ideas, is you get to choose who to work with, and don't tend to like working with arseholes. So everybody's
That's why we've never worked together.
Everybody's really, really nice. Look, I mean, I can't pick one, but
Can
I'll
I
just
say somebody that was exciting that you worked with? That when you started working with Emily Maitlis, it was a real moment, and for you to take her from the BBC to make a podcast, that was the reason that she left, to make a podcast. That was a really big deal.
Yeah, and we'd done Americast at the BBC, and I remember going into her office at Newsnight. I had the idea for Americast, and I sort of knocked on her office door and I said, look, I really want you to present a podcast. And she'd never done any radio broadcasting before. She was just a telly person, and she didn't get it. She's like, oh, it's all a bit fluffy and a bit, she's like, I'm not sure. And at that point I had long hair and a beard, and she was like, this guy with long, she talked about it afterwards, this guy with long hair just walked into my office when I was about to interview like Prince Andrew or something, and tried to convince me to do a podcast. Anyway, but she did it, and Americast was hugely successful. And this is the thing about podcasting, it's just so fun. It's like, it's DIY. You're basically a startup every time you're like creating something from scratch. No matter, even if you're working for the BBC, sure, you have the kind of like the promo power, but ultimately you've got to create a good podcast or product, and you've got to create a thing that people want to literally go on their phone, find, click on it, subscribe, and then come back every week. It's not just like putting the TV on or flicking the radio on, listening to a news bulletin. People still have to choose. Yeah. So working with people you like, and like, as well as Emily, like Adam Fleming, who's like kind of my original podcast bro, like we did it before. We created that feed from scratch, which has now become one of the BBC's most successful podcasts, with you know, they were turning people away the other day when they did the live show.
Because it was
here.
full, not...
But yeah, Adam is just a really great guy, really sweet, and we just tried different things. I remember, like, during COVID was when we were talking about taking newscasts. Newscasts had just gone daily, I think, and then COVID happened, and we suddenly found ourselves producing and presenting a daily podcast from home with a team of people. So stuff like that brings you really close together, and you'll have had that with the guys on Porno and with Matt Ford, who's coming later today. Your podcast, it's a really special relationship, isn't it?
I mean, mentioning Matt Ford, like the idea that podcasts were sort of this, I guess, like sub-genre of media before, and some people listened and some people didn't, or maybe it was thought of as like kind of young medium, which just isn't a thing anymore. Matt, that I host British Scandal with, he has a show of his own called The Political Party, which often appears in the news as, you know, an agenda-setting show that has lines that sort of set the conversation. And the other day, Keir Starmer was like, as you will have heard, you know, Kemi Badenoch saying on Political Party with Matt Ford, you know, these are things that are quoted. These are things that political advisors listen to on the team of, you know, the Prime Minister, so that they can brief him on what people have said. So, yeah, I think they're absolutely up there with those.
I can't wait. So Matt's actually doing the Political Party at the Playhouse later today, and he's got an amazing guest. He's got Louise Haigh, the former Shadow Transport Secretary. He was sacked, Sheffield MP. She's going on Political Party later, and I think that's going to be fascinating. It's you know, a year anniversary of the Labour Party being in government. All the stuff we saw with Rachel Reeves last week. Matt just has a way of like getting really great information. It's such a great show.
She's always got something to say.
Yeah, it's great. And Matt, the other thing about Matt is his impressions, which are second to none.
Yeah, it would feel maybe inappropriate for him to do those during that, but let's see.
I know we're running out of time. Dino, I know you won't answer this, but I'm going to ask you. You said you don't work with arseholes. Is there anyone that you have worked with and then it's subsequently turned out that they are a bit of an a-hole?
Definitely, yeah, but that was in my radio career rather than my podcast career. Yeah, no, because you get when you talk about setting up a podcast, you like size each other out, don't you? You do a pilot, you kind of...
It's the ultimate chemistry test.
Yeah,
I don't
totally.
think that you could host a podcast
No.
with somebody that you didn't like. I don't really know how that would work.
No.
Whereas radio, you can do it a lot.
And it's like, yeah, totally.
You're right, it's relationship and it's engagement, isn't it? And that's as important from a listenership audience point of view.
Yeah.
Yeah, you
as
can
is
hear
for
it, can't you, a mile
Yeah.
off when it's two people that have just sort of been mashed together. And that's true of producers and presenters as well.
And we don't do that. I mean, the way it usually starts, because a lot of podcasts are double-headed now, whether it's like Lily Allen and Makita Oliver, that conversation started with Makita going, do you think you and Lily, who are, you know, your best friend, would like to do a podcast? And they were up for it. We could have done that show with Makita and somebody else, just wouldn't have been the same show. And like the show we're launching next week with Joe Wiley and Zoe Ball, we started having the conversation with Zoe about doing a podcast. And like Joe was the first person that, when we discussed the co-hosts, she was like, I'd just love to do it with Joe because they've been working together for 30 years. They're mates. They've like shared, you know, offices and studios for years, and they've just got such a hinterland together. And you just can't fabricate that sort of stuff.
Yeah. Cross Wires, obviously it's year 2. It feels like there's been a real buzz around the city this year, more so than last year. It just feels like everyone, anything when it gets past year 1 and people go, I understand it now, I get it, that there's been a real kind of buzz. How do you both feel when you kind of wander around Sheffield this weekend and sort of see just how much is going on and how much people have bought into it?
I feel like we have taken over this year in a way that maybe we didn't last year. Last year was a kind of statement of intent, really, and we did everything that we could that you can do in the first year of something. But it was definitely putting things in place. You know, we didn't manage to do absolutely everything on our hit list. And then we've grown exponentially in a year. I mean, we've got double the amount of shows that we had last year. I look double the age that I looked last year. And so, I think what we tried to do was listen to what people liked and didn't like about last year. And that's the great thing about being an independent event, that you can kind of increase things, decrease things. We're stretchy, you know, we can make this what people want it to be. And I feel like we've done so much more, you know, politics, kids, you know, music. Partnering with the BBC was a huge thing. I mean, I can't think of a festival that's this young that offers this many free shows. Yeah. I mean, you could come to Crossed Wires all weekend and not spend a penny. And I think that's that's the thing I'm proudest of.
Yeah.
We understand that live shows, whether it's music or comedy or podcasts, are expensive. And so we really wanted to make it that you could come and it be your full weekend, but it not break the bank.
I actually feel really emotional walking around town. I've bumped into Paula Edwards earlier, who said, "Oh, Dino," she just grabbed me. She's like, "Sheffield is shaking this weekend." She was just like, it's such a buzz around the place, and it's so nice to see everybody like in Barker's Pool having a drink, going to see a podcast, because like we've worked our asses off. Like there's an amazing team behind this festival, from Hannah, the festival director, to James, our co-founder. To Rose,
Kate,
Kate, Tim Cleesby, who turned Cole Brothers was a shell 3 days ago, and he's created that amazing venue from nothing. We've honestly worked our socks off for the past year to put this on. So to see it come to fruition, to see everybody enjoying themselves, and we should say as well, the reason it feels much bigger this year is because we established it. You said earlier. Last year it was just a poster and some bookings, and you hope people turn up. Now people sort of get what it is. I feel like now they really get what it is, so next year will be even bigger. But like having BBC Sounds here in Barker's Pool, helping us take over a venue with the biggest names, Frank Skinner, Russell Kane, we had Chris Mason, like Michael Palin, Greg James, like all these people coming to Sheffield. That's been enabled by people like the BBC helping us. Yeah. Like that's a massive, massive thing. They don't do that very often. So they took a huge leap of faith in this. And like we've had the head of speech at the BBC, Mohit. We had John O'Wall, the boss of BBC Sounds, yesterday. And they're just like looking around, and you can see the penny dropping, which is like, this is what it's all about. It's about listeners. It's about real people. So took Jono into Day Fever to see,
to cut some shapes.
To cut some shapes. But like to listen, you're seeing like 40, 50-year-old women having the best time of their lives, or Sarah Cox is bouncing up and down. It's like, this is our audience. This is who we're talking to. And I think sometimes in the industry we forget that. We talk to each other in kind of windowless rooms with lanyards on. We're not in a windowless room. But actually this is what it's about. It's about people who listen to shows. And Greg was saying that earlier, wasn't he? It's like, this is what it's all about. So it's been really special. So thank you all for coming. And there's still shows on today. Yeah. And there's a few tickets left.
Pod Save the UK wrapping things up for us this evening. I mean, I said to Dino at one point on Friday, I was like, I think we might be landing the plane. Like, I think it's going to be okay. And then I had a really humbling moment where two grandparents were holding the hands of their little granddaughter, who was probably like 5. And they said, "Did you love Nick Cope? Was it really good?" And she went, "It's a bit loud." I was like, "Great, we've done it. We've done what we set out to do. Everyone's happy."
And we've just bumped into 2 blokes from Leeds who stopped us to say what an amazing weekend. They were going, "Are you doing it the same weekend next year? Because I've just got a deal at the Radisson." So we were like, "Yes, we are." So
I know you've got to go, but looking ahead, where do you want this to go?
I mean, just bigger.
James O'Hara saying, "Be careful." I don't even know what that means.
Just bigger, like so Ed, who's doing our filming for us this weekend, he said he went to the family shows, like Alice mentioned Nick Cope, and all the parents are going, "We want a whole stage of kids shows next year." Like, so it's just, how do we grow it? But that's the great thing about a festival you start from scratch, is that you can listen to people and then go, "We want more of that." Like, the parties were big last year, but last night we had 2,300 people leaving Help I Sexted My Boss, beelining for Cole Brothers.
They flowed down the stair. It was like watching, those like really scary videos of like tsunamis coming from really far away. And those kind of like a sort of like,
I like that.
Yeah, like an apocalyptic sort of film.
Even James, who set up tram lines, I could see the look in his eyes going, "Hold the doors."
We've got 3 bar staff on. Oh God.
But yeah, but last night having Nathan Shepherd from Six Music and Emily Pilbeam just like turning Cole Brothers, we went from a Radio 4 archive show in the morning to 12 hours later having an indie disco in the department store. Like, what other festivals doing that?
Yeah.
I said to my parents who are here and my brother, I was like, "Oh, you should come for a drink. We're going to have a drink after this." They were like, "We've got a really full evening of events, so I don't know if we'll be able to make that." I was like, "Okay, well, I'll catch you at Christmas." Great, thanks.
You've got to go and introduce No Such Thing as a Fish.
Who are podcasting royalty. They started around about the time that we started My Dad Wrote Porno and are still going strong and still do unbelievable numbers, and they're packing out City Hall. So yeah, I'm going to go do a stage intro for them.
Well, thank you both very much. I think off the back of this, we could officially now declare Sheffield the UK City of Podcasting.
Yes,
100%.
I think
Taking
so.
that title, we are having it. Thank you. And just on behalf of everyone, thanks so much for the work that you put into this. It's an amazing thing to have here. I think everyone who's in the audience would agree they've had a fantastic weekend, however much you've been to see and do as part of Crossed Wires.
They're silently nodding, to be clear.
And I think we all can't wait for 2026.
Yeah,
so
but we've got half a day left, so let's go and see some more shows and have a beer in Barker's Pool and enjoy
Well
it.
said. You're always on, aren't you?
You're always on.
Thank you, Dino. Thanks, everyone.
Cheers.
Thanks very much for listening to this episode of Steel City Business. It's been really lovely to have you with us. Now, you know how this works. If you've enjoyed it and you want in on future episodes, then just follow us on your podcast app or on YouTube. The show is very active on LinkedIn. Just search for Steel City Business and come and connect with me as well while you're at it. There's loads more about the show at steelcity.business. And you can get in touch by emailing James at steelcity.business. And hey, if you're in business in Sheffield, then, well, why not put yourself forward as a guest for a future episode? And of course, we're always open for a good chat about how audio marketing could work for your brand. Until next time, thanks for listening.